Much anticipated April stats episode. Everybody's just been on, waiting on bated breath for us to release this. We're 6 days, or 7 days, I guess, but 6 days since we got sent these stats, I guess. So I know we've all been waiting. We are here. We will post this on Monday. So thanks for joining us for another episode. Some interesting information in the stats package. So we'll be breaking that down. As always, this podcast is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute any legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. It's not intended to cause or induce breach of any existing agency agreement. Cole, take it away.
Thank you, Austin. So as always, guys, we like to start with what was the headline for the stats package. So this month's headline is Rising Sales and Price Gains Hint at Stability in the Fraser Valley Housing Market. I mean, the way that interprets is, yeah, that's great, right, Austin?
Sounds positive.
Sounds good, I would say. So, I mean, spring market activities improving. That's not a surprise, but it's nice to see that it's not just a one-off month. We're seeing some continuity there, and we're seeing some consistency as well. So that's good. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's still concerns about affordability. There's still interest rate concerns, and then obviously economic uncertainty is still a big one as well. But yeah, we're seeing some progress and we're seeing some positivity. So I think that's good.
Yeah. So, I mean, to break down this a little bit more of the headline, at least, I think the context would be like, yeah, activity is definitely improving. We figured that would happen in the spring market because that's typically the most active part of the real estate calendar. Haven't said real estate calendar in a while, but we've brought it back. That's good. So that we kind of saw it coming. We figured activity would be picking up this in the early part of the year. Multitude of factors behind that. People that were successful in selling maybe at the end of last year, getting into the market or kind of making their next part of their move if they kind of got a bite right before Christmas. So that kind of makes sense. We've still seen prices soften. Rates were pretty stable. So it was kind of a good position with softening prices and more stable rates that people felt confident about potentially getting into the market. We're still seeing, first-time home buyers get off the sidelines. I'm not sure about you, Cole, but I've definitely been working with a handful more people that are just looking at one transaction getting into the market this year. That makes sense. With that being said, typically how this works as well is for those listings, once you have the first-time home buyers that are, purchasing some of those product getting into the market, those people are now in a position to go buy something else. So that's when all of the dominoes of those sales start to happen. So, we saw a little bit of a slower start in the year. A couple sales kind of trickled in. We've seen more of that over the last couple months. And the second part of those transactions of people finally getting a bite on their house and then upsizing or downsizing or right sizing, whatever you want to call it. That's, I think, why we're starting to see some of that increase in activity and more sales kind of trickle through. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what are you seeing on the mortgage side?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you are going to start to see more people feel confident to enter the market, or they're at a point where they've kind of seen how things play out, and they feel comfortable enough to make that next step. I don't think we're going to see any dramatic shift in the market. I don't think we're going to see inventory get eaten up quickly. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty economically. I think that's a big one, and I think people are still feeling the fact that there is no guarantees when it comes to their jobs, and there's no guarantees when it comes to what the world's going to look like in a few months from now. So I think that's playing a big role in this. I was at a presentation yesterday, and one of the presenters was talking about what are some of the things that could maybe shift the market and get us back to a point where I think it's fair to say inevitably we're going to end up at a point where the pendulum swings back the other way. And the matter of the fact is that we're still not building enough homes, Austin. We're still not going to be at a point where we have enough inventory, which is funny to say right now because you're like, what do you mean?
We got lots of inventory.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Well, the reality is there's still a lot of people that don't own homes that would like to own homes. And we're going to be at a point where, again, there's going to be more demand than there is supply. What's that going to take? One of the interesting things that was brought up yesterday was the foreign buyer ban. So not to go too much off on a tangent here because we're talking about stats today, but the foreign buyer ban technically ends at the end of 2026 unless it gets extended. So that's up to the federal government to determine whether or not they want to extend that. But that's something that could significantly impact whether or not the market shifts more if we allow foreign buyers back into the markets. Yeah, I don't know. I think things can definitely shift. I don't think they're going to shift in this spring or in 2026 per se, but we are definitely seeing more activity, and we're seeing more people enter the market or at least be more interested in getting into the market. And honestly, it's great for them because they've got time. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it's like we don't have to rush into buying anything. We want to find, we know what our price point is. We want to find something that's right for us. I can't think of a better situation to be in as a first time home buyer, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good transition as we get into the headline numbers because we'll be talking about like active listings and new listings and sales and all that stuff. So we'll kind of segue into that and let's start with active listings. So in April, active listings hit 9,816 active listings. So that's 45% above the 10-year seasonal average. 45% is a lot.
For sure.
New listings were up 6% month over month. So we saw 3,549 new listings in the Fraser Valley. So again, that's a good chunk of listings for sure. But with that being said, like, when there's more listings, there's more to choose from. What I'm also kind of seeing tangibly in the marketplace is there's a lot of listings, but there's not a lot of like good listings. I know that sounds like rude to say, but like what I mean by that is obviously some stuff is priced better than others, and that will gravitate towards our buyers towards that when they're like, wow, you're seeing a bunch of stuff and this is what I can get for that price. Like that's the stuff that ends up getting the bite. But we talked about a little bit on the tail end of the last episode, but just like really important to just make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best light possible. Make sure the house is clean, make sure you're decluttering, depersonalizing, just making sure that the product shows to its fullest potential. Because this is not the market where, you don't make your bed and there's stuff all over the place and people walk in and like, oh my God, I need to buy this place. They have options and the feeling you get when you enter the home will really sit with the buyers. So yeah, sales in April were 1,118, so up 11% from March. So again, bit of a tick up from March, which we were kind of anticipating, but very interestingly, up 7% year over year, which is pretty substantial
That
when you think about it.
that's a cool stat actually right there. That number,
Yeah.
that 7% year over year, because obviously up 11% from March is great. It means we're seeing more sales activity, awesome. But year over year, that means that April of last year, so April of 2025, we actually had 7% less sales than we did in April of 2026.
hmm
To me, that says more than most of these other stats do. It means that spring market, I guess, comparing spring to spring, we're actually seeing an increase year over year, which is positive for sure.
Yeah. And this is a good segue into one of our kind of takes that we chatted about before hopping
Mhm.
on. Like, more activity does not mean a hot market. Okay.
For sure.
There is a difference between improving activity versus, a seller's market coming back. Like, just because things are starting to move better doesn't mean that the pendulum, like you mentioned before, has swung completely the other way. Buyers are active again, but cautiously. There is still some uncertainty. We're seeing gas be, I just drove by a gas station, it was 225 a liter. That's expensive in comparison. You're shaking your head. What's going on?
I shake my head because it's just hard to believe. Like yesterday, I remember seeing it at 2:30, and actually, funny enough, I did a quick search this morning. I was like, "So, what the heck's going on with gas price? Like, is this expected? Is this not expected? Are we going to see it drop?" Because it feels like one day you go outside and it's gone up 10 cents, and the next day you go outside and it's gone down 10 cents. You're like, when should I buy gas? You know what I mean? It's hard to actually determine when the right time to buy gas is. But anyways, it's kind of crazy
Well, and I think, with that as well, that uncertainty, if you're listening to this as an example, one of the conversations that we often have, not only on the podcast, but we also have with buyers or clients that we're working with, is there's often a triangle. Okay. There's three things that you end up balancing when you are looking at purchasing a home. There is budget, how much you want to spend, area, so where do you want to be, and then criteria of the house. And a lot of times you end up picking two of those three, and one of them you have more challenges with. So, like as an example, you might find a house in your budget in the area that you want but you might have to compromise on criteria. Or as an example, you might get the criteria you want, the budget you want, but it might not be in the area you want. So an example of that would be, let's say you really want a 4-bedroom townhouse or a 3-bed and rec room townhouse with a side by side garage, and you want to spend 700K on it. Well, you might not be able to get that in Langley, but can I interest you in a little bit of a longer commute in Abbotsford, right? Because based off of area, I mean, breaking news, real estate is more expensive in different places. Shocker. But with that being said, what I'm kind of seeing people kind of balance or um, really come to top of mind more when they're purchasing, as I guess is the best way to say it, is in some cases, people are spending a little bit more on their mortgage and their place to reduce their commute times because um, your mortgage, if it's a little bit more expensive on those different areas, if that's 250 or $300 a month, if you're driving an extra half hour twice a day, 5 days a week, what is that going to cost you in gas when it's 225 a liter? Probably a lot more. And that obviously doesn't account and take into account like car maintenance, oil changes, wear and tear, tires, brakes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, among other things,
What's your
insurance.
time worth too, Austin? Like,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
and I have talked about that a lot too, like, as much as it's hard to put for some people, it's hard to put a hourly rate on their time, but if you simply work at a job that has an hourly rate, apply that rate to your time because you're spending 5 hours a week, like you said, an extra hour every day, half an hour each way. 5 hours at even $30 an hour, that's 150 bucks a week. A
Well,
week,
and well, and
not a
another
month, like, that's crazy.
I agree with everything you just said. Another way that I even look at it is like, okay, well, if you're working 8 hours and you're getting paid, let's say $30 an hour, so $240 a day.
Yeah,
If that same amount of work with an hour commute on each side is a 10-hour day, and you do the math on that, now all of a sudden your $30 is $24 an hour.
yeah,
Right. So when you do the calculations on your time and what it's costing you to make that money, maybe you want to budget differently. So it's just important conversations or things to think about. But what's your time worth, right? So it's just something to think about. And I'm sure other agents and clients are having these conversations, but if you're not, it's definitely worth having.
absolutely, and, really one quick thing here, Austin, I don't wanna go too deep into this, but the discussion we're having is more activity doesn't mean a hot market, but that doesn't mean there isn't hot pockets within the market, right? You and I have talked about that a lot before on past
Yeah.
episodes, and I just wanna make sure that we bring that up again, that there can still be pockets of any market that are hot, and they're actually you're going to see sales to active listings ratio in a seller's market category because that specific pocket is highly desirable, or maybe at that particular time, that's just what the numbers tell us. But it's worth noting that as well. So maybe if you want to comment on that quickly, and then we can move ahead.
Yeah, great. It's a great point. Like the market is not one big giant thing. It's a combination of a bunch of mini markets, right? So when obviously we talk about the stats across the whole Fraser Valley, and in some sense that tells a story, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So when we look at averages or, active listings or sales ratios and some of the other stuff that we're going to jump into later. Like that's for all of the Fraser Valley, but there might be a pocket where it's like, hey, if you have a product, there's buyers looking for it, and you might see a seller's market in certain areas. And conversely, there might be areas where there's 11 months of inventory, 12 months of inventory. Like if you're trying to sell a Wally condo right now, there's lots of competition, and maybe that market isn't as strong. I mean, the price points are a lot better. I was just on the phone with somebody that was looking at like a 1-bedroom place in a building. I want to say it was listed for like 360, 369, something like that.
Mm,
And, maybe you're getting that for 340 or 350. And I mean, might be cheaper than rent. You know what I mean? Or maybe
yeah.
marginally more expensive depending on what you put down. But at least again, then you have your own place and you're paying your own mortgage. Like if you're looking to get into the market and not rent, maybe that's something that you can narrow in on. So yeah, it's just really important data because again, your first place often isn't your last place, and getting into the market can be a stepping stone into getting into the place that you want. So I genuinely believe it's a good market to potentially transact in or move in. We've seen this kind of similar ish market conditions for probably the last year? I think that's fair to say. that we've been seeing kind of really similar. And I can share that I transacted in this market. I thought it was a good opportunity to move and it made sense for me. And that's why we did it. But everybody's situation is different. Let's talk about why conditions favor buyers right now. We talked about high inventory, but what else are you like? What else would you say factors into that?
Yeah, so high inventory for sure. Obviously, that means more choices, which we've talked about. Less likely to have like a bidding war or less pressure when it comes to bidding and not having to necessarily overpay for something just because you fall in
Mhm.
love with it. Obviously, conditions are fully back now. I mean, it's been a long time since. I mean, let's be careful what we say here. There's going to be situations where maybe there won't be conditions, and I'll let you speak to that a little bit more than I can, Austin. But what I'm speaking to is that back in, say, 2021, 2022, a lot of the times you couldn't write conditions into your offer or else they wouldn't even read your offer because there's 5 other offers and at least one of them was going to have no conditions on it. So that's definitely changed and it's for the best. And I think we can both agree that not having conditions is probably in nobody's best interest. It doesn't really favor anybody, I wouldn't say.
Mhm.
And then from the borrowing side, interest rates are back down at a level that's probably manageable for the next little while in the sense that we're not going to see dramatic swings up or down. And I mean, it's consistent and it's at a point where it's expected to probably be like a norm for interest rates. So in 3 to 5 years from now, it's not unlikely that you're going to be renewing at a rate similar as opposed to what we saw recently, where a lot of people are now renewing at a lot higher than they were before, and that can obviously come with its challenges.
Totally.
Yeah, so I think that's a big one, and then potential for missed opportunities. Like at the end of the day, like what you consider perfect conditions for buying might not actually be, or you might look back and go, "Oh, the perfect conditions happened when I could have bought, but the reality is I'll never get that opportunity again." So it's interesting for sure, but do you wanna speak to the conditions at all or anything else when it comes to just
Yeah.
having more choice?
Yeah, I do want to hop in on something. And obviously, we're called the Full Subjects Podcast, and that's a pun
Yeah,
on real estate subjects or conditions. So we just
yeah,
explained our own joke. Nice work, Cole and I. But one thing I'll mention too is no subjects doesn't always mean no due diligence. I mean, for some people, it
right.
definitely does, and I'm praying for you. But there's also due diligence that you can do before writing an offer. So, like as an example, we had written on a property with some clients, and we knew the house needed some work. Maintenance was sparse at best, and we wrote an offer that made sense for upgrades that needed to be done, factoring in all of those that work that needs to be done. So it's like when you're looking at comparables that have a fully renovated or no issues, let's say, and then you factor in maybe having to replace a furnace or a hot water tank or a deck or a bathroom and kind of compare those products of like, this is what the full potential looks like. This is what it sells for versus this is a one that needs renovations to get up to that level. Um, you can do some of that due diligence beforehand is what I'm saying. Trying to sit here and be an inspector because I'm not. But what I can say is don't be blind when you're walking through places either. Notice things like plumbing if you can look at it. Have a general look at the roof. Have a general look at not even inspection based, like what is stopping you from reading through some of the strata documents before you write an offer or the property disclosure statement or like I don't think obviously you don't need to do an inspection beforehand, but having your financing generally in order with a pre-approval. Would you recommend that, Cole? That's a rhetorical question, always. But again, no subjects doesn't mean no due diligence. It often means that you can do due diligence beforehand that makes sense so that there's no surprises at the 1 yard line, if that makes sense. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, no, that's great. I just that's those are exactly the points that I was hoping you were gonna make. The last point on this is just when it comes to buyer psychology, at the end of the day, we've talked about economic uncertainty. That obviously plays a huge role when it comes to people feeling comfortable to make a large purchase, which is often the biggest purchase they'll ever make. There's still worries about a recession. I mentioned this earlier in the episode about people being worried about their jobs. So these are all major factors when it comes to people making these decisions. And these factors lead to other people also having those same reservations and what it typically takes is it typically takes a large enough group to start showing interest that other people start to go, hey, my friend's buying, maybe I should buy. Oh, their friend's buying, maybe I should. It tends to be more of a domino effect. So this uncertainty is being felt internationally, quite frankly,
Mhm.
definitely within Canada. So that psychology is going to have to change for people to start wanting to buy. And I mean, having demand from other sources. So I talked about the foreign buyers ban, for example. If we start seeing buyers come back from outside of Canada, that's going to put some demand on the market. It might see a shift of people within Canada wanting to buy. Is
Mhm.
that the perfect solution? No, probably not. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of factors at play when it comes to shifting the market. And it's typically doesn't happen quickly. Obviously, we saw in 2021 with a global pandemic, things can change
Mhm.
relatively quickly, but it still took some time. But at the end of the day, like these things take some time and psychology plays a big role, probably one of the biggest roles in how markets are going to shift when it comes
Mhm.
to going back, I guess, to more of a balanced market. 'Cause I mean, ideally, that's where we want to go. It is possible the pendulum will swing back the other way, like I said earlier. But at the end of the day, we'd like to find ourselves somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think especially people look at real estate as an asset, and people don't like the idea of an asset being potentially worth less by the time they move in versus when they purchased it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that's not possible by any means, because quite frankly, it is. Like straight up, it is. What I would also say, though, and this is just my opinion, is if you look at it in a 1 year snapshot, that is much different than saying, hey, I'm going to live here for 10 years or 8 years or potentially longer. And what do you think is going to happen in the markets over that amount of time? I'm not sure. Like, is it possible that prices go down for the next 11 years? Definitely. Can't rule it out. But we've seen people want to live in the Fraser Valley and Langley and Surrey and Greater Vancouver area. I don't see that changing. It's nice to live here. That's why people choose to live here and have it be more expensive. Um, yeah, I do genuinely believe, like we've said during this podcast, like, yeah, things are maybe a bit tougher right now, a bit slower, but we believe that eventually things will swing the other way. So,
For sure. And Austin, you brought up pricing, so let's get into that. So let's jump right into pricing here. So we'll talk about benchmark pricing. That's typically what we're talking about. So overall, the composite benchmark pricing for April was actually up 0.1%. And Austin, I'll let you explain this in a second what that means, but that price point was 899,200. So that's considering all asset classes. Do you want to quickly speak to what that means?
like benchmark price.
Yeah, and when
Yeah.
it's all, like, joined together into one price point for all classes.
Yeah, so basically, it's taking into account changes in detached homes, row homes, duplexes, all that kind of stuff, acreage, townhomes, as well as condos, and it kind of puts all of that together to have a general trend, basically, of what's going on with prices. So we saw detached homes be down very slightly month over month. Same thing with townhomes, which is interesting because townhomes were actually doing fairly strong, I
Mhm.
believe, in some of our other episodes. Just drag the puck here for a second.
Yeah, and I think they might have been strong relative, like, less down than others, if I'm not mistaken,
So
and then I'll
February to March went up by, I think it would have been similar. So I'm seeing benchmark price be 770, 700 up to 772, 700. So 2 grand on 770K. Yeah, very,
yeah,
very
okay.
small amount. And then in April, it was down to 771, 600. So basically
There
went
you
up
go.
2 grand, down one. So it would have been up 0.2% basically if we're splitting the difference on that. So
Right.
honestly, that is very, like, from January, basically, it's all been townhouses have all been within, like,
Steady,
3 grand of each
right?
other benchmark price, like,
Yeah.
that's pretty tight, like, that's pretty tidy. So that's interesting. So I think that's an interesting point.
Sure. And then condos, just to wrap up what Austin was saying, they were up 0.4%. So that's why we're actually seeing a net increase for April. So condos ended up doing pretty well because of whatever reason. They ended up being up overall in April. So which is
Wonder
good.
if that just has to do with price, like, we've seen prices be fairly soft on condos for a while, and
Fair.
maybe it's just getting to the point where it's like, "Hey," for people, like, "Hey, this makes sense if I can get that or get into the market." So
Mhm. Yeah, for sure, and it's yeah, people are pricing probably more appropriately. It's like
Mhm.
sale prices are better reflective of what something's worth and people are willing to pay, so that's another thing. But I mean, overall, it remained pretty steady month over month, and that's the takeaway I'm getting with a slight overall increase, but that's a good thing in terms of prices remaining similar. It's certainly better than them going the other direction. I mean, people might argue the opposite depending on
Mhm.
what you're trying to do. If you're trying to speculate and wait till it hits the bottom, then yeah, maybe you're hoping prices keep coming down. But I think in general, that's a good thing. So if we talk about year over year really quickly here, down detached homes were down just under 9% year over year. Townhomes down 7.4, and condos down just over 8%. So townhomes, as we've talked about many times before, tend to be the strongest product when it comes to maintaining their price point because they're right in that middle area. You get the people upsizing, you get the people downsizing, and they're obviously great for family homes as well. So it's a pretty strong asset class typically. So yeah, obviously prices have come down year over year, but as of currently, they're remaining fairly steady. I think it's fair to say.
Mhm. Yeah. I think we've actually kind of recapped the rest of our notes here. Timing the
Yeah,
market. We kind of segued into that. I'm using this word segue a lot today. I don't know why. Anyway,
yeah. You must want to buy one of those segways.
no, I'm good, but maybe. Lastly, if we're going to predict what happens next year, I think I don't know about you, but I guess there's three things that can happen. Slow stabilization. Scenario two, I guess, could be, do we get a rate cut? The economic updates have been kind of interesting. Really sounds like the Bank of Canada is really at tug of war with a bunch of different factors like
Hmm.
employment not being great, inflation because of gas, the gas prices, like a lot of different pulling scenarios. I guess with that being said as well, economic slowdown could delay recovery a little bit. My prediction is we're getting late into the spring market now. I wouldn't be surprised if things slow down a little bit. We'll still see sales and stuff kind of trickle through. People still looking for places for sure, but I think we'll still continue to see some of the hesitation, buyers staying cautious, all that stuff that we've kind of seen for the last little bit here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, more or less. I'm curious to see if we see a late spring market, like if it pushes into the summer months or I guess that's like if it pushes beyond May into like June at all, I'd be curious to see if that happens. I already mentioned the foreign buyer ban thing. I think that's something that's quite interesting. If that gets taken away at the end of this year, I could see that leading to a pretty strong spring market next year, so 2027. Yeah, I don't see anything dramatic changing with respect to rate cuts, rate hikes. It's a very interesting predicament because it feels like the issue we're seeing with gas prices right now is something that could change on a dime. Like if the US announces tomorrow that they've signed a peace treaty with Iran, like that's going to significantly shift the ability for them to transport fuel again and then hopefully also bring down the cost of fuel. So that's a very interesting one, but at the same time it could ultimately lead to unfortunately a war that lasts many years. It's really hard to know what's going to happen with that, and I think the Bank of Canada is likely kind of trying to figure out that as well, but they're hesitant to raise, they're obviously hesitant to decrease. There's arguments for both. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of just remain status quo for a while until something pushes far enough one way or the other that it forces them to make a decision. I think ultimately you're right. I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see things kind of fizzle out, I guess, a little bit going into the summertime, and then prices will hopefully remain fairly stable through the summer. We'll get maybe a bit of a push in the fall there. Usually there's a little bit of a fall push, and then before we know it, we'll be back into winter and things tend to slow down again in the winters. Yeah, I don't know. Things can change so quickly. That's the problem, right? It's hard to predict right now. It feels like any moment a new significant change could happen in the world and that could dramatically shift the direction of things. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm having a hard time making predictions when there's just too much unknown.
Very well said. Well, we said this would be a quick one, 31 minutes on the dot, which we're typically around half an hour. So go us. Even when we say we're going to be a shorter episode, we end up hitting that half-hour threshold, which is amazing. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode. As always, if you're listening but not subscribed, first off, that's very hurtful. But please do. That way you get notified as soon as an episode drops. And of course, leave us a 5-star review if you haven't done that. We do appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.